in. My name is Amanda Helen, and this conversation will be with Jackson Hardin. We are going to be exploring the gift of masculine energy. Welcome, Jackson.
Thanks for having me.
I'll introduce him just a little bit and then we'll get to the conversation. But Jackson has spent 2 decades dedicated to personal growth and self-development work. And he now offers high-level private coaching. He supports men and women to develop strength, will, and perseverance. Now, many of you who follow me identify as feminine essence beings, and some of you feel you have an overexpression of these elements, and some feel that you could use a little bit more. So we'll be talking about that today. Jackson is a martial artist, and was a client of mine, and this is one of the reasons that he reached out to me and resonated with my coaching framework of utilizing body connection to reflect on and develop our external reality. He's also a human design projector, and I know there are plenty of projectors who follow my channel, and he's a new father. So for those of you who are also new parents or parents, we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I'm a woman with more of a feminine essence, and I found it very interesting to find someone who's doing similar work as me, but on the opposite pole. I find Jackson's presence to be extremely grounding, and I think his expertise of masculine embodiment is soothing. So I imagine many of you will feel the same, and I hope that you enjoy this conversation. We're going to be talking about the expression of healthy masculine energy in work, in relationships and intimacy, as well as early parenthood. And both of us are in process with all of this. So we're exchanging ideas and exchanging our own understanding of these embodiments. So welcome in, Jackson. Before we get into all of that good stuff, I always like to start these dialogues with inviting my guests to share anything they feel is relevant from their upbringing or their childhood, just to kind of lay connection and framework and build familiarity for this exchange. So anything you want to share from your childhood?
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Um, as you ask that, what kind of comes up is just my relationship with my father growing up and my mother growing up, and just the dynamics of the household. That I think really shaped a lot of the ways that I am in the world, and a lot of the things that I share with other people, or that I give to other people through my work. And one memory in particular that stands out a lot from my childhood is when my mom and my dad split up. I remember we were getting in the vehicle outside of our home. It was very early in the morning, and I don't remember exactly, what was said, but it was something along the lines of, "We're leaving." I was like, "Oh, what about dad?" And it was like, "Well, he's staying here."
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that, I've done a lot of work on myself, of course. That's something that constantly comes up. But I think that pivotal moment had a really big impact because, for whatever reason, um, my body, mind, or whatever decided that, oh, there's no one here anymore. Now I've got to take care of myself. And from that, I think stemmed a lot of, my behaviors moving forward, and a lot of the things that I offer people of how to be kind of self-sufficient and take care of yourself, and how to manage your time and energy, how to create a destination that you want to reach and show up to that. So I think that's interesting to note, because there's other people that would have, a lot of people have similar experiences like that, and perhaps their response was a little bit different. And that's not, good or bad or anything, but it is interesting. And as we, get into this conversation, we could probably talk more about this. It is interesting to note like how a lot of the gifts that we have come from some of the biggest wounds that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the one thing that kind of comes up as you ask that.
Mm-hmm. Already starting with perseverance. And, there's this masculine focus on independence and self-sufficiency, whereas feminine is more interdependent. And it's really important to have both. Very, very important to have both. So I love that you were able to receive and reflect on the gifts from something that felt challenging for you. Maybe it didn't at the time, but I'm sure it had its challenges, and harvest something from that. That's beautiful. as let's just get right into masculine energy since this video is
Or
titled. So I'm curious, how would you describe masculine energy?
yeah, I was thinking about this question. You know, as you sent me a couple of things we might be talking about, and the question of masculine energy and the question of feminine energy, I think are intertwined, of course. And the way that I would answer it, would kind of be following in step with some of my teachers, but a lot of times when we think of the notion of masculine energy or we think of the notion of feminine energy, we're thinking of them in very superficial ways.
Mhm.
Think of them as, masculine energy, like, I don't, what comes to mind, like construction worker, or like, even the strength, will, perseverance side of things, where we think of feminine energy and we think of, dance and flow. But behind these more superficial expressions of these energies it's a deeper, um, there's something deeper. And so I would have to answer that question in a couple ways. When I talk about like masculine, capital M energy, I'm talking about, or how it's been portrayed to me and how I can really relate with it, is it's consciousness.
Mhm.
It's it's not how you dress or behave or the things that you do. That stems from the way that you are. So a good example that I found helpful, and maybe this will help bring everyone in on the conversation, is we're talking about that part of you that has not changed since you were born and will not change. That constant awareness that's always there and available to us if we're able to lean into it. So, as we're talking, you might bring to mind like your earliest memory, and then a memory a little bit later in life, and a memory maybe in your teenage years or when you're 20, late 20s, or and then a memory now. And during that time, like, I'm curious, can you feel into that part of you that hasn't changed at all throughout that?
Yeah. That's like the essence, and that's the witness and
Right.
the observer. Yeah.
So on the deepest level, when I talk about this and the way I've been taught, that is the masculine,
Yeah.
is consciousness, that awareness, and leaning into that part of our being, will inevitably produce some of the things that you're speaking about. And even as we're talking right now, I don't know if you notice this, but I can see your posture shift. As you dial into awareness, as we start to sink into consciousness, like there is a kind of stillness that takes over, on the inside of the body. The things that might be moving through our body aren't as loud or don't animate us as much. So like there's that element. And then there's the other element of, I know you asked me about masculine energy, but I don't know, I tie them together. Like the feminine aspect, the deeper feminine aspect would be connecting to that thread of life that runs through our body. So there's these two things taking place at all times in us. There's awareness, and then there's the happening, like what's
Mhm.
actually taking place. And again, that happens in all of us all the time on some level or another. Some of us are going to be more geared to lean towards one or the other.
Mhm.
But I think, I believe that it's important for us to cultivate both and to be able to access both when life requires it of us.
Yeah.
So, as far as the question, how would I define masculine energy? It'd be consciousness, the witness.
Yeah.
And from that, more of the, lowercase m terminology, would be, the strength, will, perseverance, discipline, um, purpose, vision, stick to itness, but that all stems from our ability to kind of rest into the infinite part of ourselves.
Mhm. Oh, that was a gorgeous definition. Thank you. I love that. I love the distinguishing of really the heart and the soul of what masculine and feminine is, and then what branches from those. So, for the purpose of our talk today, we'll say, capital M masculine energy, and then more like the lowercase m masculine energy, which is the elements of the perseverance and the will and the leadership and the initiation and these things. But at the heart is that capital M, which is the consciousness, knowing that we're here, knowing that, there's the space holder for the life to be
Right.
expressed. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's I've said this in my videos before, the riverbed. to
Hmm.
the flow of the river.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to share a poll. I put a poll up on my YouTube channel. I love to do that because I love interacting with all of you. And I said, what is your relationship with your masculine energy? And who knows how everyone's defining that, but 44% said masculine energy overpowers my life and drains my feminine energy. 28% said I'm naturally very feminine and could use more masculine energy. 20%, I feel I express a pretty balanced amount of masculine energy. And it's interesting, 0%, I had an option, I have a masculine essence and I want to ground into this energy more. So I want to assume that most, and I kind of know this about my followers, most of my followers and subscribers have more of a naturally feminine essence and are looking to balance their masculine energy. Either they feel it's overexpressed and it's draining them, or it's underexpressed and that they could amplify more of that or use more of it. So these are kind of the dynamics. I'm assuming that most people are thinking of the lowercase m masculine energy for the, because that's what's more widely described.
Mhm.
So what would the healthy expression of masculine energy look like within our lives? Or, I mean, you can use examples of work, family, health. Like, what does it look like when that's in balance?
I want to I guess I'll lay something out first and then we can talk about it. Um I think this notion, that people are pointing towards that the masculine energy kind of takes over their life. An important piece to talk about here is our world is set up for masculine energy.
Yeah.
Like that is what is on a lot of levels encouraged, from us. Um, Even if we are a feminine kind of essenced individual. We're required to shut that down in order to wake up in the morning, get dressed, go to work, sit in traffic, work through the 8 hours, kind of, there's this push that's required. And it's something that's required more now out of women than has ever really been required in the past. And so that's kind of having a lot of impact on our culture as a whole, and our culture is also having an impact kind of on our, our own expression, because there's there's the desire for more of that, of the independence, of the ability to do those things, to be able to go to work and have a job and not have to fall into like these rigid identity roles. But this is all kind of affecting the way that we express ourselves in our daily lives. So I just want to kind of put that out there before we talk about like this healthy expression aspect, because because the way that the world is set up, it's going to probably feel like that for most people. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like asked of you
Yeah.
that you do that in order to, make a living for the most part. There's of course certain jobs where you don't have to do that, but it's just that's something that I think everyone's feeling. And I'm not sure that a lot of people kind of understand that aspect of just our culture and our reality. And maybe they do because they're, on your channel, and I'm sure you talk about these kinds of things as well. But as far as healthy expression goes, it really comes down to, what is it that you want to create and do or be in this life? What is being asked of you? What do you feel you're here to do? For some people, really leaning into that disciplined side of self is going to, serve them quite a bit, as you kind of alluded to with the quiz. Some people feel they need to lean into it more, some people feel they need to lean out. I'd say really trust that aspect of yourself. If you feel you're over giving that side of yourself in some way, there's probably some truth to that. So what's a healthy, it's hard to say what a healthy balance is as a whole. It's really
Yeah.
based on an individual basis of what's required in order for you to feel like you're showing up to life in the way that you're here to show up to it. And on
Yeah.
the flip side, if you feel kind of out of alignment with those things, we could talk about different things you can do to access different energies. But First I'd say just kind of intuiting it is important. Knowing what feels right or wrong for you.
Mhm.
Ask me more about that though, because I feel like there's a better answer and I might have lost it, somewhere in that dialogue.
Yeah. I mean, what was coming to mind for me is I remember one of my amazing long-term clients is I mean, he's very masculine essence and such a dedicated entrepreneur, dedicated to his career. And he established something called Weekend Wednesdays. So this just came to me as I
Yeah.
asked you this question. And so it was structure because he designated his Wednesdays to be in flow. So
Hmm.
he carved out time and he wasn't always perfect about it, right? He'd be like, oh, my Wednesday morning just got completely filled with meetings or something. But he knew that he needed that creative space, that openness to play his guitar for a little bit and get into brainwave frequencies that would allow him to do high level thinking or go on a walk outside and listen to a podcast. He was working, but it was in a more feminine way. And it was very important for him to move his business forward. Like he understood how important that was and how hard it was because there's so many demands on his time because as a society, we don't value that open creative free time and we don't program it as important to
Hmm.
productivity even. Not that that should always be the goal. And that's
Right.
even like
Right.
an masculine way to say it. But I'm curious, it's interesting. I think my work more lies in the sense, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, of people coming to me who are just overwhelmed with the masculine and want some more feminine energy in their lives. They want that body connection. They want like a bit more flow. They want to have more radiance, more magnetism. So it makes sense that that was the response on my poll. And
Mhm.
I'm curious if your clients are more caught up in this like I'm having this imagery of the riverbed being just like a puddle on the no direction, just like this puddle being absorbed into the earth, needing structure, needing discipline, wanting focus, purpose, flow, like direction. Is that correct? Is that your clients are more leaning into this edge of I have a feminine essence or maybe a masculine essence, but I want more masculine. I want that direction. I want consciousness in my life. Is
Mhm.
that
Yeah, for sure. A lot of the people that I work with come to me because they feel that they're lacking some sort of discipline or they're lacking some sort of direction in their life. And yeah, so that's very common for the people I work with.
And how do you work with them? Like, what do you do? If someone's like, I need direction, I need focus, I need purpose. Because I know when we worked together, it was amazing. Like, I have a very set way of like, I like to give my clients tasks and they respond very well to that. They can check it off a list. I mean, you went above and beyond you had structure within my structure. It was
Mm.
pretty amazing. Like you really had your process dialed in. So I'm curious what gifts you share with your clients to help them find their own structure and if you have any examples of that.
Yeah, I think a big one, particularly for people, I mean, if we think about it this way, people come to you because they feel they have more of a feminine essence and they're being drained. A lot of times people come to me because they feel they have more of a masculine essence and they don't feel on
Yeah.
task, right, or on purpose with it, which is actually like a very common plight for a more masculine essenced individual, no matter how on purpose they actually are, right? Like there's this ongoing, like, oh, I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
So that's just always happening. And what I like to do with a lot of these individuals is we need to figure out like the root thing is purpose a lot of times, for masculine centered people. Why am I here? Is what I'm doing enough? Is this why I'm here? Am I doing it right? So there is oftentimes this um desire to understand themselves at a deeper level, their purpose, right? Like purpose is really tied to this kind of work. So there's a lot of ways that we may work to get a little bit clearer on what that is. I could go on and on about that subject, but it'd probably bore your audience in particular. But identifying where do you want to go,
Mhm.
and we can identify that on a lot of different levels. We can identify it on the level of the mind, kind of like what we were doing with the big and little m. We can identify it in a deeper way, like what do I really feel called to do versus what do I, you know want to do for little smaller kind of motivations. So identifying where they want to head, and then identifying what are the things that you need to be doing in order to get there. It's really simple. It sounds kind of ridiculous when I break it down, but it's like, where do you want to go, and what are the things that you need to do to get there? Right? Like, all right, cool. So now how do we do those things regularly, to continue moving towards, that destination? Um, a lot of times people are leaning heavy in one direction or the other. That's another thing to kind of be clear about is some people are over, and you've already talked about this, are over like hyper vigilant masculine, and some are don't feel they have it at all. So the person that doesn't feel they have it at all, we're working to develop some of that routine and structure through, I really like, daily practices or like a morning routine aspect. There's particular breathing exercises that would be more um, attuned to developing that masculine capacity, and some that would be more attuned to the feminine. But to make it short, where are you heading? What are the things you need to do regularly? And then how do we turn those into kind of bite-sized things that you can show up to on a regular basis? I find a lot of times that the challenge that people have when it comes to the quote unquote discipline side of things is they're asking like way too much of themselves. They aren't doing 10 push-ups a day, but for some reason they think they're going to start doing 100, tomorrow, right? So breaking things down into these bite-sized pieces that people can move towards.
Yeah, I love that. I recently did a video about the importance of micro habits,
Hmm.
and I read the book, The Compound Effect. And it just inspired me so much that these small daily things that we do add up to be really big things over time.
Yeah.
So it's taking that pressure off. So now it's like, for how that shows up for me is, I mean, I've started to go to the gym and do strength training after having my baby. And like, I don't always want to go. So I pull up my masculine essence and I'm like, okay, we'll just go and maybe, do just something. Just do something. Don't just not do it because you don't want to. Just go and do something. And of course, I'm paying attention to my feminine hormone cycles and things like that within my flow. But there is so much what I do. I feel like I'm in integrity when I do it. Like
Hmm.
I feel that there's something, there's some sort of satisfaction I get afterwards. And that's, yeah, one of the questions I was thinking about asking you is, I feel like there's so much lingo out there in the world of femininity about follow what feels good and let it feel good and make sure it feels good before you act. Like really wait for the feeling, only act in joy.
Hmm.
And when I think of discipline and perseverance and pushing through, and I even think of the feeling of arts when I watch it. It's like this, oh, like just do it. Do you think that that's like, I just want to talk about that. Like, what's important about showing up when you don't want to show up sometimes? And like, how do you know when it's too much when you're draining yourself? Like for you
Yeah.
personally or that you've worked with?
It's one of those things where it's important to have some self-awareness around it,
Yeah.
and a lot of that is just learned through trial and error when it comes to like overdoing things. Um, because again, like we could sit down and say, okay, exercising this many times per week is what the healthy amount is for somebody, your age and your fitness level. Cool. But we need to be able to actually see what fits for us and what works for us. But as far as, doing things that you don't want to do and like that good feeling, I think particularly, well, there's that part of us that feeds off of that kind of that masculine side of us likes to break through things. It likes
Yeah.
to, it likes to penetrate. It likes to
Mhm.
penetrate like the resistance,
Yeah.
right? Of there's this part that's like, I don't really want to do it. And it's kind of like we're gonna do it anyway. And it feels difficult. There's like this tussle or this fight. And then it's like when you work out for the first or go for a run, the first 10 minutes sucks. But then after like 15 or 20 minutes, you've kind of broken through. And of course, there's like a lot of things happening inside, on a chemistry level that are taking place. But there's also like breaking through is really nourishing for that masculine side of us. Um, so I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to
That
touch on it.
breaking through is such like we see it all the time in the world of, I know this isn't like a gender thing, but it is in a way too. Like a lot of us are born one way or the other. So in the world of guys, we see this a lot.
Mm,
You know, like a fight in a ring is you're breaking through a lot of, not just, you just see the fight, the external, but there's a lot of internal things that are taking place in a fighter that he has to work through, up through fight camp, 12 weeks of showing up to practice day in and day out, whether you want to or not. And then you get in the ring and there's the resistance of that, the being on a stage, you could go out there and get knocked out in front of everybody. That would be embarrassing. So there's all these kind of internal things that are taking place that have to be overcome in order to achieve that outcome or that goal. So along the way, that's nourishing to know, like, I got up and I went to the gym. I knew I was supposed to do that. Like, you feel an integrity and that feels good, and then you do that over and over again to the point where hopefully you've prepared yourself enough to get into the ring and beat the person in front of you. And then there's another breaking through, like this resistance of actually a human being that wants to pummel you, right? Like breaking through that and being able to win, or at least doing the best that you can and coming out the other side losing. You could hopefully have the mindset of like, well, I did everything that I can. I feel like I showed up to this. It wasn't my night, kind of a thing. So there's definitely nourishment just in that aspect of breaking through for the masculine part of all of us. So that's something to keep in mind. And that's why I like to do kind of like what you're saying, the micro habits. I like to do for people starting out like 5 minutes of a meditation practice in the morning, or 5 minutes, just go for a 10-minute walk. And then once you do that, there might be some flow that starts and then it gets easier. But just identifying what's the minimal amount that needs to be done in order to get over that hump, get over that barrier, and then you can kind of ride that success a little bit.
yes. And I want, those who are listening, because you naturally have a feminine essence, so trying to kind of heal that in general, right? Um, I know that for me, starting this business, starting this YouTube channel, doing the work that I do in the world, there's been plenty of resistance. I have created it from feminine energy mostly, but I mean, come on, filming myself and putting it up on YouTube for who knows who to watch, thousands of people, like lots of resistance came up. There's just been a ton over time. And I think that this is a really important aspect. Like, don't just always wait for things to be easy. Like,
Mm.
push through your internal blocks, push through the times where you don't want to open up the computer, um, push through as far as health and wellness goes, like the times you don't want to show up to your mat for your yoga practice or you don't want to go to the dance practice. There's so much merit in these moments. Now, if you overdo it, especially, I think in a female body with the way our hormones work, that's when burnout happens, but don't shy away from the resistance. Like, I love that description, Jackson, of that breakthrough. Like, that's really, really important. I want to check out the chat too.
Mm.
Hi, everyone. I've got Amber. Amber says, I love that some of the beautiful gifts we have come from the wounds we've had. Hi. Oh, hi, Rima. The Alignment Academy with the Rima is here. You all feel free to respond as we're talking. There will also be official Q&A at the end, or you can ask questions as we go. Love hearing from you. Let's pivot now to relationships and intimacy and being in connection with someone. I know you also offer coaching and guidance in the realm of creating intimacy between partners. I'm curious in your work how you use these dynamics of masculine and feminine energy to do that. It's not something that we talked a lot about actually within our work together. So I'm just curious to hear more.
Um, yeah, I think I want to say something about the last thing we were talking about, and I think it'll tie in here
Yeah.
as well. Um, I think it comes back even to your question about like the healthy expression of these things. Um, and it definitely ties into relationship where there is like this centeredness, this groundedness, this presence, this breaking through, right? That's required, we'll just say like in the realm of relationship, right? Um, but there's also a sensitivity that's required. You know,
Mhm.
there's a ability to feel what's actually taking place around you that's required, particularly when you're sitting in front of your partner, right?
Mhm.
As and a lot of times, usually I'm talking to men about these things. So I'm also trying to, I know
Yeah.
my analogies and stuff might not land with your audience very well. But but that's required, right? Like a lot of more feminine essence individuals actually enjoy the stillness of their partner and they hate it at the same time, but they also enjoy it, right? Like the ability for them to kind of be not as expressive, and they do want them to be expressive at times, but it's like a paradox.
Mhm.
But the same is true kind of in the gym and in our work. And like in this pursuit of, purpose or doing these things that we feel we're here to do, is that it's required for us to be sensitive to what's actually taking place and not just to push through all the time. So
Yeah.
being sensitive to your body's needs, being aware of like, wow, I'm doing a little bit too much. I've got this goal that I want to accomplish, but I really feel actually, I'm not talking myself out of the workout. I really feel like I do need to rest today. And
Yes.
that's what I was talking about. Takes a little bit of trial and error to actually identify, um, because it's subtle. It's a subtle thing to pick up on. Is this me actually needing rest, or is this me talking myself into wanting rest? So through experience, we can kind of feel, I'm glad I took that break. I feel an integrity by doing so. Or we can feel I shouldn't have taken that break. I feel out of integrity by doing so. Okay, I'll have to make that adjustment next time. So in the realm of relationship, a lot of these things, that we've talked about take place, but you have to, there's also this aspect of awareness that isn't just about yourself and your goal. It's
Mhm.
about the world around you. It's about the present moment. Are you able to feel what's happening in the present moment? Or are you so caught up in your mind about what needs to happen next? When you're sitting in front of your partner, are you also present to what's happening across from you? Or are you so focused on, you know, um, where you want to get or where you want to be? Or are you focused on work? Right. So now like there's this is a common thing with masculine individuals is they're not, we hear this present, not present,
Yeah.
because their mind is elsewhere. Their body's here, but their mind is elsewhere, or their attention would be a better way of saying it. Their awareness is elsewhere. So when it comes to relationship, a lot of times what I'm teaching men to do is train their minds and bodies to be present, to be here. And of course, you can see how that would apply to work or any other aspect. If we're not present with what we're doing, then it's not going to be as effective. But in relationship, there's again bringing your attention to the present moment, but then there's adjustments that can be made to the actual physical body that would embody more of a masculine kind of essence. And in doing so, in a moment with a partner who, whether she's aware of it or not, or whether she's participating in this kind of work or not, but when we sit back into that seat of consciousness and we're present with another individual, particularly if that individual has more of a feminine essence, a lot of times it allows them to relax
Yeah.
and allows them to kind of feel that thread that we talked about earlier that is kind of running through their body. And as that starts to take place in your partner, it actually feeds the masculine. So now
Mhm.
there's this reciprocating energy going back and forth where like now the masculine is being nourished and available to be a little bit more here,
Uh-huh.
you know, and that feeds the safety and the container for the feminine. And there's this back and forth that takes place. So that's a whole thing that we could, pick apart in a lot of different ways. But when it comes to relationships, a lot of times teaching men how to be present with themselves, with their body, with their partner, the certain ways to hold their body, to breathe, to speak, the ways not to speak, all of these things are going to have an impact on the dynamic taking place.
Mhm.
And we can use that to kind of enhance the polarity between our partners and ourselves. Or if we're unconscious of it, we can constantly be shutting that down, We can be shutting down polarity and attraction, and we're not even aware of why.
Mhm.
So that would be kind of a rant on it.
I
But I'm
love that.
happy to dive into any of those things in more detail.
Yeah. And I'm going to say, ladies who are tuning in live, if you want to ask a masculine energy man about relationships, now's your chance. You ask any questions. Um, so first of all, it reminded me of co-regulation in the nervous system. That's this ability to be close to somebody who's a safe nervous system, and then your nervous system automatically regulates.
Hmm.
It's incredible. And that's why, healing practitioners, aside from the manual work that they do as like a massage therapist or acupuncturist, just their ability to be a safe nervous system is already having a healing effect.
Hmm.
So when I used to practice body work, making sure that I'm entering into the space as regulated as can be. I'm a human, so sometimes, depending on the situation, I might be a little bit out of whack. But no, especially with craniosacral, I would sit with my clients and just spend a moment before even doing any work and just letting our systems attune to each other. And that's
Mhm.
co-regulation.
Mhm.
I also had the analogy of sunlight and the moon. So the sunlight reflecting that, being the masculine, generating that presence, generating that energy, and the moon being the feminine, reflecting whatever is being generated. So it's like the masculine just decides to be present. And
Mhm.
then this beautiful reciprocal exchange starts to occur. Those were
Mhm.
the things that popped into my mind as you shared. And we actually have a question. Is there anything as a woman I can do in my husband's presence to help him be more present?
Yeah. And it was actually as you were sharing, that part about the sunlight reflecting on the moon, I was thinking, and I know this wasn't your intention, but there might be like this way that gets perceived that the sunlight has to shine in order for the moon to be seen,
Mm,
right? So now it's like I'm not
yeah,
radiant because of the way that you're showing up.
yeah.
Right. So then the question, of like, well, is there things that I can do to help my partner be a little bit more present?
Uh-huh.
Right. So absolutely.
Mm,
Let me see how I want to answer this though. I think the very base thing that can be done in order for you to help your partner kind of be called to presence would be to connect with what you're actually feeling in your body and express that to him. And I don't mean tell him about it. I don't mean tell him a story about it or tell him how you're feeling. I mean, show him how you're feeling. I know a lot of people that watch your channel have been learning how to connect with their body and allow their body to kind of, through the dance and through all the things that you're pointing towards, this radiance,
mm,
right? So this radiance can come in forms that we might not think are desirable. And a lot of times we shut those expressions down, or we shut that side of our radiance down. We say that they don't want to see this part of me. And guys do a really good job of helping women hide those parts of themselves by complaining about them when they show up,
mm,
when these things are shown. But if you want to bring your partner to presence, connecting with what it is you're feeling in that moment and reflecting it to him in the way that you move your body or the way that you sound your body.
mm,
So that would be kind of the equivalent of seeing a firework explode in the sky and your attention goes to it. Like there's lights and there's sounds. Oh, what's that? The attention, the presence is now on the fireworks. So it's kind of like what's happening in your body and allowing that to be the thing that calls that presence and attention forward and towards the present moment.
mhm. It makes me curious about emotional regulation and if that's important, because I feel that at times, if there's, and this is, as a woman, if there's too much emotion, it can shut that presence down. And maybe this is about finding a container, of a masculine energy that can hold all of that. But what do you find? Like, do you feel that emotional regulation is important, or what role does it play in this connecting into emotions and expressing it? Is there a way to ground it or to alchemize it into love and warmth, or what? Yeah, what's the relationship of that?
So when you're talking about emotional regulation, are you talking about emotional regulation in which individual or both individuals?
Both, but often, like, this was like the wild feminine of like the tornado or the wildfire, and it can almost be destructive
Hmm.
because it's so much, and it's almost it could be referred to as like an unhealed feminine expression,
Hmm.
where it's just, it's not, there's not presence in it really.
Hmm.
And I wonder if that creates more presence in the masculine, or it shuts that sunlight off of
I
just,
think
this is too much.
it depends on the individual. It
Yeah,
depends on
that's what I was
it depends
thinking.
on the man sitting in front of you because
Yeah.
I mean, and by really, it's hard to fault the men in this the same way it's hard to fault, you know, it's hard to fault anyone in it. We aren't trained really, our bodies, our nervous systems aren't generally trained for that amount of emotional expression.
Yeah.
And so it does shut us down. Um, and so there is like an attunement that can take place if that's something, that you want your partner to be able to do, to be able to find how much of this is so much that it shuts him down,
Yeah.
right? But also how much of it is required, and it's probably going to be a little bit more than you're comfortable with
Hmm.
to actually bring his presence online.
Yeah.
It's going to be a little bit more than you're comfortable with. You're going to be uncomfortable with it because if you were comfortable with it, he wouldn't feel that you needed his attention in any way. He's like, you got that. You obviously you've got it under control. But it's not until you get kind of past that piece of where you feel you're in control that he's going to go, "Oh, wow, she needs my attention. She needs me to be here with her right now."
Hmm.
Right. So there is definitely emotional regulation required on both partners' sides. Like he needs to be able to not shut down, but that's something that kind of takes time and practice for guys to develop the nervous system to be with emotions. Because just think when we're growing up, don't do that. Don't, why are you angry? Stop doing that. Stop pouting, X, Y, and Z. And so our entire lives, men and women, we're both trained that emotions are a bad thing and
Hmm.
don't express them and don't show them. They're disruptive. This comes back to the conversation about masculine being in your masculine too much in the workplace. Same environment. Don't show your emotions here. We're here to get things done. Right.
Hmm.
So we have been trained, A, not to express our emotions, and B, that when emotions do come up, they need to go take care of that. That has nothing to do with me.
Hmm.
Right. So it really depends on where your partner's coming from and if they kind of want to take that journey. And it also doesn't because you can find what is he capable of holding.
Yeah.
And if this is like, the person that you're committed to and want to be with, taking it out of like a thing for you and find this is where it kind of comes into the realm of sacred intimacy is it's like about something bigger than you and me or you
Hmm.
your partner. It's
Yeah.
about something bigger than that and calling your partner into this fuller expression of himself through a fuller expression of yourself, but
Yes.
not to get your own like small needs met,
Yeah.
but for a bigger picture, for
Yeah.
something more than just some internal kind of like I don't know. It's hard to it's definitely hard to explain this. I don't know. Does that land at all, or is that helpful at all? Is there anything I can clarify a little bit more, talk a little bit more about that would be helpful in that regard?
I mean, you're doing a great job. And I'm curious, Amber, if this is landing for you too, since you asked the original question. I, it's something I help my clients with, is bringing emotion into their body. So it's just
Yeah.
fascinating for me to, because that comes intuitively to me in my work. Often my clients will start to feel, they'll feel fear, or they'll feel sadness or joy and delight. And I say, great. what's the body sensation of that?
Hmm.
And then we bring it into sensation. So joy feels like there's 1,000 butterflies on my skin, or I can feel fear. It feels like my heart froze up. And so now that's something that I like to take into conversation in the presence of the masculine. If I see a sunlight, I can say, it feels like, for lack of a better analogy right now, there's butterflies on every cell of my skin. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Mm.
Like that is a very visceral feeling that I feel brings the masculine into presence with like, wow, tell me more. Or if I'm feeling scared, like my heart just stopped. My muscles are frozen versus I'm scared. So
Hmm.
it's kind of bringing that into language and of course embodying it. And it's something that I really work with my clients on, which I think is interesting. Amber says, thank you for explaining that, Jackson. It is really helpful. I love hearing that from a man. So, for example, the more that I'm in tune with all my senses, like joy, pleasure, the more it feeds a man and
Yeah.
brings
And
presence and
and and sorrow and pain,
sorrow and pain. Yeah.
anger. And this
Yeah.
and this is where it gets really interesting because these are the things that we don't show.
Yeah.
And oftentimes these are, if you think of them like these different energies are nourishing to a man. Maybe we should just have the whole conversation about from a man's
I
perspective.
know. I
Right.
know.
So all of these things are very nourishing to us, right? And what happens a lot of times is there's a certain energy that we need, and it's like a nutrient. You can think of it like a nutrient, like we crave certain nutrients or we crave certain kinds of food. Water is a really, let's just talk about water, right? When you're thirsty, you crave water and you need water. Then once you have it, you're like, okay, I've got water. You can think of the different feminine energies, which are infinite, of being the same way. And if we're craving a certain energy and we're not getting that energy, then in 9 times out of 10, it's completely unconscious. We seek that out somewhere else.
Hmm.
And so, yes, to your, showing him all these different emotions is nourishing, and the darker emotions are nourishing. The darker emotions are probably more important because these are the ones that we close down in ourselves and they're not receiving it, from us because we have, fears around them, which are probably valid. Um, but I just want to kind of pinpoint that because that's really where I think the magic lies, is
Yeah.
because it's in the things that we are too afraid to show or give that the attention and presence is really drawn.
Yeah.
Because there's something that you're holding back for probably a valid reason, like he left the last time you showed it to him. But there's something that's not being shown that if that was shown, that would bring his presence. And
Yeah.
it's also important there's a distinction between your own kind of daily life stuff that's going on, like what whoever did at work yesterday, and they did, like work drama. We don't want to see your expression of the work drama the same. Well, I don't want to say it that way. Does this pertain to him in this present moment, to us in this present moment, or is this something from somewhere else that has nothing to do with us? So there is like a distinction to be made that your man's not like a dumping ground to just come take everything too like that. So that's where like having therapists and women's groups and things like this can be really helpful. And the things that are, you're making me feel this sadness, don't say that, but showing, like being able to intuit, like this is happening because of the way that you're showing up right now. You seem
Mhm.
kind of distracted. He seems like not really here. Ow, that kind of hurts, and showing him that hurt
Mhm. Through the
versus
body.
through the body,
Through the
right?
body.
And yeah, I want to emphasize through the body. Not, it's not a talking thing.
Yeah.
It's not a telling thing. And I do
Yeah.
like the descriptives that you were using when you were kind of talking about the description of it. But it's a difference in how do you how was your day, right? And show me how you're feeling, right? Like those are two different things that are going to lead you to two different places. I don't know if I'm explaining that properly, but showing someone how they're feeling is very different than telling someone how you're feeling.
Yeah. And this just reminds me of that reciprocal energy, a masculine, feminine, capital M masculine consciousness, presence, part of the title of this video, holds the space and container for feminine, capital F feminine, to be the thread of life and express life, which feeds the presence. And that's the dance. That's truly the dance. That's the emulation. Um,
And that's the dance. Sorry, you asked me earlier about the balance of like the healthy, masculine, like this individual that you were talking about that started taking Wednesdays to kind of take the break, right? So that's kind of the dance in the work life of somebody who's tapping into these principles and trying to live in a way that's kind of consistent with them, is knowing like I need to nourish myself right now. So I'm going to close this computer and go for a walk. And I'm going to, do some breathing, or I'm going to put some music on. So finding a way to dance throughout the day and the energies in a way that's going to serve you to continue showing up the way that you want to show up.
yeah, I love it. Rima says, I'm so curious to know how the masculine views feminine range. I'm having new and untapped parts of me emerging, and I'm slowly deepening into confidence that a partner will have the ability to hold and love that range. And I love it first, which that reminds me of the nutrients you were talking about, that all of these expressions are nutrients, that full range. Am I right on your
That full range. And certain people are going to, be pulled towards, you know, parts of that range more than others. Um, but so the question was around kind of the masculine's desire for the full range. Is that right?
Yeah, it seems like a
Or
general. I'm
capacity?
so curious to know how the masculine views the feminine range. And I think you spoke to it with the nutrients. And I don't know if you want to say more about that.
Yeah, well, I'll say again, a lot of these things most men are subconsciously aware of, but not consciously aware of.
Yeah.
Like, so if you were like, hey, how do you feel about me like yelling at you and showing you my anger? They're probably that, you know, most guys probably gonna be like, I don't know, maybe. Um, right, like it's an unconscious thing. But at the same time, some guys will be like, oh, you know what, that does sound kind of good. And you should yell at me a little bit. Right. So like there's the whole range can be nourishing. And what's really interesting is when we start to what makes relationship, I think, really interesting is when we start to think what part of this range does my partner need? What does he
Yeah.
need from me right now? Like what would really nourish him today? Right? Not from like a place of being codependent, but from a place of like, I love this person. I want this person to feel served by just our dynamic, our relationship. What does he need right now? What would be nourishing for him right now?
Mhm.
Is it and that can come in a lot of different ways. That can come with like he's in the office working and you just come in and bring him a glass of ice water. Like that could be really nourishing. Um, so really turning the question to what does he need? What
Yeah.
does he need? And a lot of times, again, the thing that you hit on, the thing that'll really do it for him might be the thing that's really uncomfortable. And this is where this turns into more of a spiritual path of kind of dissolving your ego and your preferences in service of love or in service of, your relationship.
Yeah. I love that. I'm looking at the time. Are you okay going a few minutes over? Because I want to ask you two more questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, the first is, well, I know that you're a new dad and I'm a new mom, and I'm just how masculine energy or like routines or how that's shown up in you as a father. Like, how has this masculine consciousness, presence, routines, like what has shifted for you? And congratulations, by the way, your baby is adorable.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
So this is really relevant to me right now. And on my channel, I like to share what's on my heart because that's what comes across as the most natural for me. And I know that there's new parents. I mean, it's not my biggest, subscriber following, but it's a relevant question. How has this shifted for you as a parent?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that. And what comes to mind is the baby is a wonderful analogy for the feminine, right?
Yeah.
The baby is nothing but moment by moment
Yes.
expression,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so the way that kind of that's impacted my life is it's completely decimated every aspect of my life.
Yeah.
Like it's, the structure and routine aspect of my life is going through a complete obliteration and transformation right now. Like the big she, or you could call it the baby, came in and kind of destroyed everything.
Hmm.
And at the same time, like I can intuit how it's teaching me so much right now about some of the maybe too rigid aspects of the discipline structure routine that I use in my life sometimes.
Hmm.
And the other thing about the baby is, I've gone from living by myself for a decade, to now being in a household with a newborn baby, and my partner has two children already. So it's like everything is being kind of torn up and spit back out, and it's giving me the opportunity to find a new way of kind of dancing with all of these things that is going to be required since I'm no longer just living by myself. But it's been great. It's been great. The baby's super cute and funny, and my mom's here right now. She's been here for about a week. So they're getting to spend a lot of time together. And then another piece about it that's been interesting, particularly with the older boys, is these boys have been raised by their mom for the last several years. And coming into the household, I was like, wow, there's no order here. So it's been like creating this structure in our home for all of us
Hmm.
because, like we've talked about, the masculine serves the feminine and vice versa. And if there is, you're saying, no structure for the river to flow, it just becomes a puddle. So if there's
Hmm.
no structure for all this energy that's taking place in this household, then things get a little bit, watery. And so my partner's been really great about bringing the energy to the dynamic, and now it's kind of my turn to bring the structure to the dynamic and really serve these boys with an example of both.
Hmm. Yeah, it reminds me having especially in those early days. How old is your baby again?
Almost 4 months.
4 months. Amazing. That there's this call to consciousness because to be present with your little one, I mean, they're so present and they're so attuned to your nervous system as their caretaker. And so it's this call towards masculine presence, yet there's a need for flow because the
Mhm.
baby doesn't want to sleep, the baby doesn't want to sleep. The baby eats when the baby wants to eat. So it's like the routines and rhythms kind of they start to come back and then they're soothing, but especially in those early days, um, tears everything apart. And there's a call to flow. And if someone's not comfortable with that feminine flow, it can be very jarring to the nervous system.
It's been very jarring to my system. And I'm someone that wants to have some of that in their life, but it's again, like I was saying, leaning a little bit beyond what's comfortable when expressing to your partner what's going on. And like it's in that place that the actual magic happens. It's kind of the same for me, right? Like it's in that place where I'm kind of uncomfortable with that amount of flow and lack of structure that I think the real gifts are found.
Yeah. Yes. And this might be a good segue. So you were watching one of my videos. I think it might have been about surrender, human design projector. You're a fellow projector. A lot of human design projectors follow my channel. Um, what were you kind of seeking from my work as a masculine essence being to instill into kind of your business or your life at the moment? And this makes sense now that I'm thinking about it because you had such like a shift towards the feminine within your personal life. So maybe there was a draw to that, but I'm just kind of curious what drew you because you signed up for the three session coaching program.
Mhm. Yeah, well, a big part of it was definitely the projector aspect. There's not a lot of people that I see diving into that um in general, but also those that I do don't have the embodiment aspect tied in. And that's something that's been really big, for my work and in my life is the embodiment aspect of things. So approaching some of the challenges that projectors have from a place of embodiment. And I think that you're spot on in identifying like the feminine aspect of it, right? Like the need for that flow that brings attention um and in theory creates the invitation.
Yes.
So anyway, I thought that you just kind of the way that you were approaching it was very in alignment with like just kind of who I am and the kind of work that I do, but it was also very on point for what's actually needed, for other projectors that are being challenged in that way.
Yeah.
Is that how do you create that attention and that invitation um in order to give the things that everyone that I know as a projector has such deep gifts to give.
Yeah. And it's interesting for me with you because you have, and I speak to this sometimes in my videos, but because most of my followers have more of a feminine essence, you have a masculine essence, but are a human design projector, meaning that the strategy, for those of you who aren't sure what we're talking about, you can Google human design and you'll find your energy type and all of that. I don't want to get too much into that right now, but your strategy is to wait for the invitation, to magnetize it, to become it,
Right.
which is a feminine strategy. It's to magnetize. And so it's the missing piece of like, I can't just push through this. I can't there's an element where I actually have to just lean back and radiate.
Right.
How
Yeah.
has that been for you as a masculine essence being to explore
It's
that a little bit?
brutal. It's so brutal because like there's again a lot of my work centers around creating direction for people, right? So
Yeah,
there's also creating direction for myself. And actually even just now that you mention it, it's funny because, you know, maybe that's a distinction for me and other people to take away is, maybe it is your job to create a little bit more direction for people as projectors because we can see the big picture of things. But maybe that doesn't mean that you get that same kind of direction for yourself.
yeah,
But for me, it's been hard. I think several years ago, I by happen chance kind of developed the ability to kind of feel what's a yes and what's a no for me. And I definitely use that a lot with big decisions. It's something where like on paper things might look like I should go right, but I'll take that into consideration along with like the intuitive aspect that says go left,
mhm,
and try to find the answer there. But I think that ability to again that self-awareness and that embodiment piece to be able to connect with ourselves and feel what's a yes and what's a no and use that kind of as an indicator of what to do and what not to do when it comes to being a projector and waiting for the invitation. It's such a vital tool because there is like this resting and there is like this, well, I could do this or I could do this or I could do this, but without that internal yes or that capacity to tap into that, any of those decisions might not be the correct one.
yeah,
So I think yeah, it's definitely difficult, but it becomes easier over time. And it becomes easier because you start to develop a relationship with that part of yourself. And for me, I've known for many years now, if I listen to that part of myself, even if it feels illogical, um, things generally things that are greater than what I could have imagined or come up with myself by myself will take place. And if I
Mhm.
don't listen to it, things usually become very painful.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's it takes a little bit of trust. And what I'd say is if people lean into that, like start to intuit what's your yes and no, and just make little decisions. And
Mhm.
over time, you build a trust with it and you can make bigger and bigger decisions. And then this resting and waiting for invitation aspect becomes a little bit more available because you have trust in this part of yourself.
Yeah. The best analogy I have for this that I thought of. So I love to go partner dancing, salsa dancing, Latin dancing. And as a projector, it's my role to be magnetic and then to stand on the side of the dance floor, right? If I'm sitting in the back, if my body language is all curled up,
Mhm.
like I'm not going to get an invitation to dance. And I've played around with asking people to dance, but like that just does not feel good in my embodiment as a projector and even as a feminine essence being. But for you, since you have a masculine essence, it feels more natural for you to ask to dance, but that's kind of like, then you're not waiting for the invitation. So there's this rub for masculine essence beings to wait for the
Yeah.
invitation. So your invitation is finding someone who has that open body language is the invitation, who maybe makes eyes like they're ready to dance. And then that's your invitation to go ask the dance. But it's a different layer because the presence that we have as projectors is really a lot. Like it's can
Mhm.
be disturbing if someone's not ready for it. So to just go ask someone to dance who's just hanging out, talking to a friend would be like overwhelming. But
Mhm.
it's like the middle ground between that. And I think it's really fascinating to me, again, to talk to a projector who has more of a masculine essence, because I don't run across you guys very much unless you're hiding and watching my videos. I don't know. But
Yeah.
does that kind of sit right with you, that analogy?
Well, it's interesting because, in my younger years, that was never something that approaching people that I would like to talk to never went very well,
Yeah.
but at the same time, y- there were certain times in my life where I learned like I could walk into a room and just pay attention to those who pay attention.
Mhm.
And then as the night progressed, or even at dance, like ecstatic dance, things like this, the moment might spontaneously arise for that engagement to take place.
Mhm.
Versus being like walking in and being like, I'm interested in this, and like that's
Yeah.
not good. So yeah, I think it's a great analogy because I've personally experienced that as well. Even being, more of a, a masculine centered individual, like going directly towards the things that I want to experience sometimes does not,
Yeah.
it just falls flat. And it's just wild because at the same time when when I have, whether it's business relationships or like personal relationships with people, they're usually pretty profound,
Mhm.
but I can't be the one that starts them, it seems.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't want to like people to walk away thinking that that's like some belief that they have now. It seems that's the case. But again, I'd say take some time to experiment and see what works.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm curious. So, your clients, would you work with someone who maybe has more of that feminine essence naturally and help them with routine if they
Oh, for
need?
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you can do. So, where can people find you? What's on your YouTube?
Yeah. Well, my website, jacksonhardin.com, if you want to connect with me, my email address is on there and you can send me an email. Um, my YouTube channel there's a couple things on there. I don't even know it's on there. I haven't looked at it in so long. With the newborn and everything, there's been this start stop on building it. Um, but I do have a YouTube channel with a couple videos available, and then I also have a monthly Patreon group coaching container that I hold that's particularly around kind of goal setting and achieving those goals. So each month we meet and we essentially review how the month go, what worked out, what didn't work out, what do we need to adjust moving forward, and what are you going to focus on next month. So it's something we do every month. The next one is actually this week. But anyway, that's on Patreon, and if you go Patreon /Jackson Hardin, I'm sure you'll have these links. You can find out more about that.
Amazing. And for those of you tuning in to know that, I mean, there's a lot of coaches who help with like goal setting and reaching the goals and purpose and things, but Jackson's approach, if you're into my work of embodiment, of self-care, of well-being, of presence, then this is a really unique slant on that, because I find a lot of coaches go at just the mind, but you really have that embodiment piece, which I think is important. So if that medicine would be for you, definitely go check Jackson out. Anything else you want to say before we close?
Um, I guess the one thing that comes up is, yeah, I'm curious to hear how, this conversation goes for people, and maybe it would be more appropriate just to have a conversation from the masculine perspective on a relationship.
Yeah, that was
We
a
could
hit.
just, see how that goes. But no, I just want to say thank you for having me on, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. I appreciate our time together, working together. So thank you very much. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to uh, whatever's to come.
Amazing. Thank you.